Hello everyone, you have made it to the webinar. My name is Gabrielle Fontaine of the Freelance Bookkeeper, and this is the Next Generation Bookkeeping webinar. And we're talking about how to simplify the transition from compliance to advisory. And you can also see with me my special guest, Chris Reagan, and you're going to hear a little bit more about him in a minute if you don't already know who Chris is. But we have a lot to cover, and as always. And this webinar, the reason it came about is if you've been in the accounting technology world for a while, we've been hearing this for years, that we have to become the trusted advisor. And it's true. Much of it's being driven, I believe, by technology. We'll hear more about that from Chris specifically. But what was missing, I've been going to the conferences and hearing this for years, we need to move towards advisory. But the problem is I've not seen to date anyone who is really showing us how do we make that transition, especially for bookkeepers, because our world is all around the compliance. You know, we're keeping track of the numbers that have to be tracked for every business. So how do we step into that advisory role, because it is quite different. Well, finally, I believe that this webinar is going to help bridge that gap, and Chris is going to help show us the way. So let's talk a bit about today's agenda. We have the webinar broken basically into two different main parts. The first part is the interview style, where we will discuss with Chris where the bookkeeping profession is headed and what we can do about it, because there's a lot of disruption going on and it's going to only continue. We're going to talk about the roadblocks that are in our way and how we can make this transition. And then the second half of the webinar is we're going to switch over to Chris as the presenter, and he's going to show us the software that he's been using in his own practice, that he's developed himself, and how we can use it specifically as bookkeepers. And throughout this webinar, we are going to answer your questions as well, because to me there's nothing worse than going on a webinar that you can learn from that you can't ask any questions. So use the question box on your control panel throughout the webinar, enter your questions, and then we're going to make sure that you get answers so that you can use the information that we covered today. So with that, let me introduce Chris Reagan. He's a CPA, and if you haven't heard of him, he is the Managing Director of Reagan Financial, which is a tax bookkeeping and payroll firm in Bonita Springs, Florida. And it's interesting because, of course, Chris is a CPA, but he also runs a bookkeeping firm along with taxes and payroll. He's also the founder of Reagan Financial Wealth Management. He's the VP or former VP of Operations and really the mastermind behind LedgerSync, if you know of that app. And then now he's the founder and CEO of Tax Planner Pro software, which is where we're really going to focus today. But right now you see Chris is running at least 3 different businesses right now. So I say that he's a super entrepreneurial CPA and now software developer as well.
Now that's a title right there. I like that. I like
You like
that. I'm going to button it up right now. I'm going to button it up.
Well, you know, it's funny. I met Chris and I met each other a couple years ago. I believe it was at the Sleater conference.
Sleater, yep.
Yep, and I was very immediately impressed with Chris because he's just, the way he approaches things is so innovative and forward-looking. So,
that's nice of you to say. Thank you.
Well, that's my experience in the
Well,
industry.
and what I remember at Sleater is I was manning a booth like the newbie guy at Sleater, and Gabrielle walks up, and immediately there's people that are like, well, if Gabrielle's talking to him, then I need to talk to him. And I was thinking, well, who is this person that has this following of people here at Sleater? I was like, I need to get to know you. So we tried to sit at our booth for a while. It was great. But
yeah, we had a blast. But here's a little backstory too. We've been trying to do a webinar together for a long time, and then last week we finally did it, and Citrix didn't let us. So thank you, Chris, for going the extra mile to make sure that we could do this webinar.
That's my pleasure. I'm really excited to be here. Like we had started talking about last week, I've been wanting to do this for a while, and you and I kind of off webinar for years now have talked about a lot of ideas that aren't mainstream, but are very interesting, and I think the audience today is going to find them interesting, and some of the things that we talk about today they've never heard before. And
That's right.
as a CPA, I'm going to kind of bring an aspect to what we do every day from where I sit as a CPA, and really speaking to the bookkeeper. A little bit about Reagan Financial. We have 350 full-time business clients, meaning we do their bookkeeping, their taxes, and their payroll. So we do quite a bit of volume, over $1 million worth of business, and I can see what each of your jobs are like too. And as a software developer and as somebody who's in the industry trying to talk about these things, I hope I can bring some value to our discussion today, because I have a lot to talk about. I know you do too, and just really glad to be here.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I have no doubt that you're going to bring some great helpful information to us. Like I said, it's going to be enlightening for seeing the path ahead of us. So with that, we're going to switch over to the interview side of it. But before we do, as we get into the advisory and bookkeeping, those two together, because you don't necessarily think of it, we're going to open with a poll to find out about you, our audience, and where you sit with advisory. So you should see pop up on your screen a poll that's asking you if you're currently doing any kind of advisory services with your clients. There we go. We'll get the technology, right? There it is. So are you doing any kind of advisory with your clients now, so that we can see, where are we in the stream of this transition? And this will help Chris as well in knowing, and me, but Chris is really our trainer here today. And let us know what you need most as well.
I love that right now it's 0 on the no, I don't think bookkeepers should do advisory work. I love that.
Well, that's good. That means nobody's going to be totally bored here.
If somebody would have answered that, I would have asked them to raise their hand, please.
You call them out.
You call them out. No one answer the fourth answer. No one do it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to close it out in 3, 2, 1, and we'll show you the results. And there we go. So we see that most people are not doing it, but they want to. But we have a good mix of people here.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's great.
Any thoughts on this, Chris?
Well, I think
what you expect or not?
One of the things that that bookkeepers in general have trouble maybe not the right word, but are trying to look to evolve into is, okay, I do a lot of blocking and tackling, meaning I'm down in the details doing a lot of the must-get-done work. And in many cases, that's why people hired me, is because they didn't want to do the blocking and tackling.
Right.
And so as an industry, when the industry or the thought leaders of an industry say you've got to get more into advisory, it's like, well, I didn't start this business to be an advisor. So
right.
How do I do that? Because, and more importantly, how do I stop doing the blocking and tackling when people are still paying me to do the blocking and tackling? That's one of the things that drives me bananas sometimes whenever I'll be listening to someone who's talking about 10 years down the road. I want to know what's happening 10 years down the road. We're going to talk today about what I think is 10 years down the road.
Right.
But we also have to relate it to, but what am I supposed to do today? And
Exactly. And that to me is the gap. We keep hearing the concept, but we're not seeing the steps on how to get there.
You're just going against everything that I'm talking about here. You really got to start evaluating, how do I become the center around this relationship that I've nurtured? I know most of you are talking to these clients daily, weekly, monthly. I bet all of you talk to your clients at least monthly. How often do those tax accountants or other advisors talk to them? Maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. I can tell you most tax accountants don't do tax planning, so it's probably only once a year at tax time. So if you are not saying to yourself, I've got to quit being scared, and I've got to start leveraging this relationship, well, then I'm frustrated with you, because that's what you got to do. And today we're going to talk about some software that'll help us do that. I kind of got us off track there.
No, that's okay. So I do want to ask you, fortunately, I have no idea what's going on with my screen, but hopefully everybody can still see us. And I do fortunately have the questions printed out, so I can still ask you One of them that I think is important in what we're talking about is some bookkeepers are not, a lot of bookkeepers are not dealing with taxes, so they might feel uneasy with stepping more into that advisory role. But what risks would bookkeepers have to start offering advisory services? I mean, should they be concerned about that?
Well, so from where I sit, there aren't risks, but it's important for me to prove that. So that's what I want to talk about, and to prove something, you've got to acknowledge why there would be risks. So the first risk that you're probably thinking about is, well, what if I don't know anything about taxes, Chris? I don't know anything about them. So what if I do something wrong and something bad happens to the client? So I've got two responses to that. First, that's why I developed the tax planning mastery course, is because it's a 25-hour course that teaches you how to do tax planning. Better training than most people at H&R Block and that kind of thing. If you think about the people who are doing taxes in this country, let's start with those folks. Are they worried about whether they give good tax advice or not? They trained for about 8 hours before they were turned loose with people's tax returns. I'm going to train you for 25 hours specifically on how to do tax planning. The second thing I would say is never, ever, ever confuse tax planning with tax return preparation. They're two very, very different things. For you to give someone advice on what you think their taxes are going to be and things they can do to reduce those taxes is nothing but helpful. It's like walking up to somebody saying, I've got a wonderful fertilizer that might turn that grass a little bit greener in your lawn. There's no liability associated with telling somebody that. There is if you decide to get licensed by the state and go put that fertilizer on their yard and charge them for it, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
Remember, that's a very interesting distinction about things. I think a lot about sometimes like mortgage brokers and the process of going through a mortgage and that kind of thing. And if you've ever gotten a mortgage, the person you work with most of the time is the loan officer. They're the person you ask all the questions to. They're the person that you turn in all your financials to. They're the person that does all of this stuff. Then for a month after you've worked with that person, you go to sign on the dotted line, and you work with a mortgage. What do you call them? They're like a title company representative, somebody who's from the title company that is actually going to be the person who watches you sign the note and everything. The mortgage broker works with you for a month. The title person, you may be new for 30 minutes while you sign that thing.
Right.
Who has all the liability for the mortgage paperwork? It's that title person. Who's the person that I want to talk to about my mortgage? It's the mortgage broker. You're the mortgage broker.
That's right.
You're the mortgage broker. Don't worry about what happens on the tax return whenever they have to go. If you're not going to do taxes, fine. But you've still got to be the mortgage broker because they need to come to you and they're saying to you, you guys know that there are clients that are coming to you all the time saying, how much tax am I going to owe? Oh, gosh. Is there anything you see that's a red flag? Oh, gosh. They're coming to you guys with this stuff. So now it's time to get the professional training and to get the software that allows you to do it. And just
to share my own situation, because I did do taxes. I mean, I will say it for those who've never done taxes. Don't worry. What Chris is saying is absolutely true. I have done taxes for over 20 years, but I stopped doing it several years ago professionally. Tax season's insane, so I was like, no. But as a bookkeeper, I love doing the tax advisory with my clients, and yet I'm not signing their tax return. I'm not preparing it. In fact, I'm the one who sees the mistakes on the tax returns. Right. But I'm closest to the client so that I become like the ally with the client so that the client knows how to talk to their tax preparer when the tax preparer is not proactive and they're speaking accountant speak to the client and the client doesn't know what to ask or what to say. Now, because I'm closer to them and I'm able to make recommendations or things they could try that would save them in taxes, and I will tell them I haven't prepared taxes for a few years. I'm not up on the latest tax laws, but here's the general ways that you can save some money on your taxes just because I see how your business is running. And
Well,
then the client's like, oh, really? Well, my preparer never told me that. Not that you want to start a war. I look at that you want to make it as a team effort. Sure. But it puts you in a position where the client now feels safer because you're on their side helping them, but you're not responsible for what goes on that tax return.
Let's put something else in perspective here a little bit. So in that course, after you take the course and if you get what we call the RTP plan, which stands for Registered Tax Planner, you get a designation, an actual designation once you pass the test, that you're a registered tax planner, an RTP. And so if you can imagine, if I sit a client down and I say, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, you've got two different options for your tax planning professional. The first is a CPA, that his name is Chris, and the second is a registered tax planner. Her name is Gabrielle. Which one would you like? If you're engaging someone to do tax planning, which one do you think they choose? I promise you they choose the one that sounds like they've got a designation in tax planning, even against a CPA. Because it's a misnomer to believe that CPAs and EAs are somehow trained in tax planning. Again, this is where we got to let go of the fear. We've got this whole transition is about letting go of the fear. CPAs and EAs.
Steps too.
Yeah, well, true, but CPAs and EAs are not trained in how to do tax planning. They're very rarely trained in how to do tax return preparation. You know how many tax classes I had in college? 2. They were 3 hours each. So I've got 6 out of 150 hours, I've got 6 hours of tax training. This is something that should be trained both on the CPA, EA, and bookkeeper level. My class should be almost required learning for anybody that does this stuff. I've done more tax projections than anybody in the country. I've done over 7,000 tax projections. I'll challenge anybody to have done more than I have. And that's why I trained the class. That's why I wrote it. It is absolutely the definitive guide on how to do tax planning. But before you can even start with that, you've got to say to yourself, I'm going to let go of the fear of this. Because there's nothing to be afraid of. My software, let's say you have the comment, because I heard you say it earlier, Gabrielle, you got the comment, well, I don't know any tax codes. I don't know any tax planning ideas. I don't know any of that. That's where the software does all your work. The coming up with the tax plans and the tax planning is not the hardest part of this. What is the hardest part? It's getting the client to buy in to the idea of tax planning and being able to use somebody they trust. It's either you or the tax accountant. If the tax accountant's not doing it, is where this really comes. This is where the rubber meets the road, right? We don't want to start a war. But if the tax accountant isn't doing tax planning, then I challenge you to this. Isn't it your responsibility to do it? Isn't it really your responsibility? Don't you owe that client a duty to, if they're not getting something that they desperately need, that you've got to start filling those roles? We can all say, well, I should call the accountant and say, you need to be doing tax planning with that person. You know just as well as I do what they're going to say. I got enough to do.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the difference. As the bookkeepers, we're seeing what's going on in the business every day. The tax accountant who sees them once a year is clueless of what's going on, what the client's worried about.
I mean, and I hate to put it that way, and if you guys are out there as tax accountants and stuff, don't take this personally, okay?
Yeah, well, it doesn't apply to you if you are talking to your clients throughout the years, throughout the year, but in my experience, the vast majority do not.
Well, that's why I designed the software, is because in the retail market, what we call people that don't have, that's kind of a QuickBooks-ism, the people who don't have an accountant at all. They're considered the retail market. The retail market desperately needs all of this stuff because they don't use accountants, any accountants.
Right.
Well, who's the first accountant that most of the time these people hire? In reality, it depends on what their home remedy was. And now I'm getting into a lot of things that are in the courses, but one of the things I train in the courses is every small business owner goes through a transition. We think that they open a business and then 2 weeks later they say, you know what, I need an accountant and a tax preparer. I better start calling people, but that's not really how it works. What they do is they try home remedies.
Right.
And home remedies are QBO, home remedies are TurboTax, home remedies are do the payroll myself, home remedies are I'll use a spreadsheet for invoicing, home remedies are all these concocted solutions. And once they feel the pain from that first home remedy that causes them pain, that's why they call. So if the first pain that they feel is, I didn't get this invoice right, or I have 100 invoices a day I've got to send out, I don't know how to do it. Who are they calling? They're calling a bookkeeper. If they last the whole year, and maybe they call a tax accountant if that's the first pain. But my point is, we have to recognize that we've got to kind of break out of our shell and be ready to serve all of these pain points they may come with, because the more pain points you can solve for somebody, the more you get hired, period.
Okay, Chris, so it's time for you to solve this pain point and show us how this works.
All right, so let's...
I'm going to switch you over to be the presenter.
Yeah, that's cool. And I'm going to downsize some things here, show my screen,
And just so you know, I can't see your screen.
Oh, well, let's see if anybody, do you have the chat?
We can check everybody to make sure you can see Chris's screen. I think honestly what's going on with my green screen here is it might be my recording, but it picks up the audio well, so I don't want to mess with it. But just so you know, I can't see what's on the screen.
Let me see if I can't see the questions or anything, but I'll proceed as if they can see the screen. If somebody can't see the screen.
I just looked. They said that they can see.
Yes. Most people are reporting, a matter of fact, everyone so far is reporting that they can see.
Outstanding. Okay. So here is...
Thank you, Stephanie, by the way. That voice was my assistant, Stephanie.
It was like the voice from above. It was like somebody watching over all of us.
Do you remember the Muppets? And it'd be like, yeah, who was that?
All right, so here is Tax Planner Pro. And I'm going to take you through this kind of top to bottom. And the one thing that I'm going to emphasize quite a bit is that this is extremely simple to set up. And it only takes you about 2 or 3 minutes to set up a client from start to finish. It does not require a lot of pre-training. So my advice to you, even if you just want to test it out on yourself, is after we get done with the webinar, go log in and see if you can just set it up the way that I'm going to show you, because it's really, really easy. But let me just give you a tour of what we're looking at here. So this is the dashboard, and this is what the client can see whenever they're using Tax Planner Pro, because every client gets a dashboard, and you can see it as well. What we're seeing across the top are several charts that have to do with the income, the business income, the personal income, different statistics about the tax return, including tax due. And then down below here, I'll go over to full screen here, there we go. And down below is the business summary and the personal summary. Now, what we're really looking at here is a tax projection of the business tax return and the personal tax return. So it's really handy, because what clients get to see right away is they go, oh, I'm going to make this year this, and this is how much tax I'm going to owe this year. It's very clear and clean feedback to them of something that they care quite a bit about. Yeah. Can you think of clients, how much they agonize over taxes? I bet 85 or 90% of your clients agonize over taxes. The 10% that don't aren't making any money, and you're kind of like, I don't know why you do this, because anybody who pays taxes always wants to pay less. The software itself is meant, and absolutely does this, but it is meant to be constantly updated. So what happens is, I have this book, my QBO file, I have it synced to Tax Planner Pro. So this business summary updates every week for me. So this is current information that I'm looking at. So it's not, the old days of doing tax planning was you'd come in at the end of the year and you do one tax projection, and then the client's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was going to owe this much. There's lots of planning ideas that have to take place before October. So there's lots of reasons you want up-to-date information all year long. This software does that. It then goes on to do a couple more things. So the first thing it does is it has a planning section inside of it. So once your client sees this $95,000 tax due, right, they're going to say, okay, Mr. Registered or Mrs. Registered Tax Planner, what am I going to do about it? Well, that's why we designed the planning module. Yeah. And inside the planning module, what Tax Planner Pro is doing is it is analyzing the client's tax situation just like an accountant would, right? just like somebody walking into the office would, and it looks at it and says, here's the ideas that I think you should implement. And there are several ideas built into Tax Planner Pro, and what you're going for here is you're trying to say, okay, here's all the different ways I can save you money. And here's where not only am I showing you what you owe, but I'm going to show you ways to save money. Now look at this. The user, the small business owner, owes $95,000 in this case.
Mm-hmm.
But income deferment is calculating that there's a savings opportunity right here for $60,000. Wow. So in the first planning idea, we've knocked out 2/3 of their tax. Another idea having to do with 179 expense is saying you can save another $52,000 here if you want to go that route. Right. No SEP IRA? Why don't you start a SEP IRA? You can save up to $18,000. You've got children, but you're not employing them. Why don't you employ them and you can save $22.53 by just doing that? So what this takes all that, well, I don't know any planners to mention to them. Mm-hmm. We don't have to anymore, right? You can say, hey, I've got all the ideas that we need. I can get you down to zero tax if you want to. In fact, at Reagan Financial, I have a guarantee in my highest package where I say, as a tax planner, I will show you how to get down to $1 in tax every single year. Wow. And how do I do it? I do it with the software. How can I guarantee that? I can guarantee that this software will find 100% of their tax to get rid of. You do not have to worry about that part of it. So,
heck of a promise. One thing, Chris, though, that I see as an opportunity here is for the bookkeeper who may feel like, oh no, but if I make these recommendations, you could use a Section 179, and the bookkeeper might be like, okay, the software says you could use a Section 179 and bring your tax liability down. And then if the client starts saying, well, what does that mean and what qualifies? If the bookkeeper feels uncomfortable with that, they could say, well, you know, because I don't prepare taxes, but this is like the basic concepts. Why don't you can go to why don't you set up a meeting with your tax preparer? Here are my recommendations, and they can show you the nitty-gritty details of what qualifies. I mean, that's the way you build the relationship.
You can do that all day. Now, there's lots of different questions clients are going to ask you about these things, right? And one of the things I didn't show you, let's use Section 179 expense as an example. Each one of these is clickable. So let's just click on 179 expense. What that's going to bring up is the Section 179 expense screen, we'll call it. It's called the detail screen. And there's a couple things that are interesting for you as the tax preparer. One is this video that I've produced that's probably 20 minutes long that just talks about the ins and outs of the tax deduction of Section 179. Now, if you watch this thing that I've done about Section 179, and you still don't know about Section 179, you need to just rewatch it. Because this has everything that you need in it. So
it's actually not that complicated.
You can talk to the tax accountant, but if after watching this you still don't feel like you know everything there is to know about Section 179, just watch it again. Because I have shot these videos from the perspective of I have to teach retail users how to use Section 179 because they don't have anybody to call. So it's that detailed. Inside each of these planning strategies is a projected savings box. And this is talking about different amounts you could do as Section 179 and how much you would save in each situation. So if you're looking for different strategies and ways to kind of talk to clients and say, well, if you did $5,000 worth of this, you would get this kind of deduction versus you could do up to this amount and get this kind of deduction. How many clients do you have that are still sole proprietors? Because there's lots of tax planning that can go on for sole proprietors having to do with S corporations and things like that that are really easy to understand. And you know who's going to love you? If you can convert your sole proprietor client to an S corporation, you know who owes you a steak dinner? Because that is about 4 times the fee if you can get them on an S corp versus just a sole proprietorship. So there's lots of opportunities here to work with the tax accountant, but don't get me wrong, this isn't happening overnight, but I'm also going to say, what happens if there are no tax accountants? What happens if tax accountants are gone? Who's going to do all this planning? It's you guys. And I'm saying software is hunting down tax preparers. So don't think for a second that you may not find yourself in this situation either way.
But I would say for right now, one thing I really love about it is it shows how flexible it is. Because if the biggest issue really is our own confidence in being able, because remember the big picture here is being able to switch over to adding advisory services, you could do as much or as little as you want, and the software is supporting you to do that.
Absolutely. And the software is only going to take it as far as you want to. So it's not going to take it into, hey, let's get into some really complicated stuff that we don't think you're ready for. I didn't put anything like that in here. So if somebody's doing a lot of, let's say you've got a client that does they run a private equity fund, okay? And it's like really complicated fund accounting for investors and stuff like that. This isn't the right solution for that kind of client. This is right for your other 95% of your clients that are regular, kind of straightforward tax situations and bookkeeping situations. Now, the piece of the software that I use more than any other is the planning piece I like, but it's cool, but here's where the rubber meets the road if you want to make clients happy. And that is being able to use the simulator to simulate different things on their tax return. So let's just say that you weren't going to do any tax planning with them. You weren't going to recommend any strategies. But instead, you just wanted them to have a piece of software that the two of you could get in and kind of run what ifs. Because that would be a fun meeting topic at least a couple of times a year of trying to think of different things they could do in their business and how that would affect their tax return. I know the client loves that. So what you can do is once you have this set up, which I'm going to show you here in a second, once you have this set up, you can come into personal deductions right here and say, well, what if I, instead of doing $2,000 to charity, what if I wanted to do $5,000 to charity, right? I want to increase my charity a little bit. The tax automatically changes for what's going to happen if you make that change into the tax software. Let's say they say, well, Gabrielle, what happens if I do like a $10,000 SEP IRA contribution, right? Well, let's plug that in and see, kind of what's happening. Now, in this particular situation, I think they're in AMT somewhere, so it's not changing the tax as much as it should. But that's something that's interesting because this software will show a client, they go, well, I put in $10,000 to the SEP IRA, and you go, oh, well, let me go take a look at it. It's the AMT. That's what's happening. And the software will tell you that kind of thing. So it's very intuitive and very simple to use. And like I said, this particular module is very, very kind of important to my practice and how we kind of do things with our clients and how we create that satisfaction. Again, nothing makes clients smile quicker than if you can show them ways to save money on their taxes.
That's right.
Absolutely love you for it.
And an
they
easy
will not
way.
Say,
Go ahead.
they will not say, well, shouldn't I run this by somebody before I do it? They're not going to do that. They're going to say, really? How do I do it? Show me. Show me some more. And you might say, well, let's get your tax accountant on the line. Let's all get collaborative on this. Let's build the campfire and do all of this together,
Oh, yeah, and you'll get points likely for, the tax person might feel a little like, what are you doing? But if you can get them to go like on a go-to meeting and see it, and they'll be like, okay, what software is that? And what are you doing? So they're going to be like, you're a forward-looking bookkeeper. Let me work with you with some more clients. So,
yes. That is what happens. I'm so glad you said that because that's what happens. The tax accountant goes, this is what I need to be doing in my practice too. I'm glad you brought this to my attention because I need to do more of this. Every tax accountant that I have sold Tax Planner Pro to, and there's hundreds and hundreds of firms that use Tax Planner Pro, they are always first to very quickly say, I want to be doing more planning, but I don't know how to automate it. Well, if you're the one that brings the solution to them and says, hey, there's this software we're using, we ought to get together because tax planning is where bookkeeping and tax return preparation kind of meet in the middle. We should be using this together to create a lot of value for clients and then leveraging that value to sell more client relationships together. And I've seen it done quite a bit with people who are already using it, and trust me, it's not as hard as you may be thinking it is. It's really something that's very easy. Let me while we still have time, let me just go through quickly how to set somebody's tax projection up.
Yeah, please do, Chris, because we want to allow enough time for questions too, and I see there's a lot of questions.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to downsize the screen here real quick just so I can flip back and forth some. one of the things that I haven't shown you yet is that, see how that changed right there? This is the accountant's portal. So if you purchase Tax Planner Pro, the accountant's portal that you get with it in the accountant version, you see all your clients here, right? So you can go into any client you want to. The other thing that I need to make sure I mention before I go into setting up a client is here's the courses. So these are all videos that take you through what is tax planning, what if I don't do taxes, how do I make money doing this, what tools and software do I need. All of this trains you how to use this software and make money from it in your firm. The setup of this is super, super simple. So once you go to your client list and you click New Client and you just fill out their name and their email address if you want to, then all you have to do is open up their portal. And when you open it up, both of these are going to be blank, right? Because it hasn't synced anything. Well, let's just go into the sync settings here. And in the sync settings, let's just disconnect from QuickBooks. To sync these things up, you can use QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, Xero, or just manual data entry. A lot of people use manual data entry to kind of test the system. Don't let that be what you use forever, because the client's not going to be very happy when you're loading old data in there and they're using the software. You know what I mean? So use QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, or Xero, but they'll all sync. And whenever I go to connect my QuickBooks here, if you use QuickBooks Online, which is what I use, I can use my QBOA accountant login, right? And I can sign in here and see all my clients. So it's really easy to sync client. Like you could set up 10 clients, go into your QBOA, or if you use Xero, use that. If you use QuickBooks Desktop, you're just syncing them on your desktop. But you can do this process. It takes maybe a minute, something like that, to sync. All I've got to do is run down here and let's find somebody. I've got in this little test account, I've got a whole bunch. We actually have 3 different accounts for QBOA, because QBOA will actually max out, or it used to. I think they've kind of tried to fix some of that. But let me just find somebody that is a good candidate here. Bear with me. Come on. I wish they would give me a way to sort this, where I could sort it alphabetically, because a lot of these people, well, here, let me, looking for a Reagan Financial thing, so if you see it, holler. Where are you? Am I live? Am I still live?
Yeah, you're live. I'm here. I just can't see your screen.
There it is. Okay. So here we go, and we click Authorize, and it's going to sync to QBOA. That took a while, didn't it? So normally it's not going to take that long, because you're going to be able to find it, unlike me. But once I sync, look how fast that happened. Right there, it's all done, and now I'm going to the summary screen. And my business tax projection is now done. It's done. You say, well, how's it done, Chris? Well, what it does is it reads the data from the QuickBooks Online company and builds the transaction for you. So you can see what was in QuickBooks as of 7/22, which was the last time we set it to sync every week, so it syncs on Saturdays. So that was last Saturday. We do that so you don't get any bad transactions into your system. If you want to set that sync cycle to monthly or quarterly, you can do that. Then it creates a tax projection, and you've got an entire tax projection in your system. So first minute is setting up the client and syncing them to QuickBooks, okay? Now, how do I build a personal tax projection? That's a little trickier, right? If I'm a bookkeeper, I'm used to the QuickBooks, but how do I do the personal one? Well, you come over to this little screen, this little module right here called the Vault. And the Vault is interesting because it's a document management portal. So you can put client documents on here, and the client can retrieve them anytime they want to. But here's where the real magic of Tax Planner Pro kind of comes in, is you can drag and drop their personal 1040 in here. Watch what happens. So I just dragged over a sample 1040. It's in the Vault, and there's a button underneath it that says Send to TPP. I'm going to click that. When I did that, it uploaded the 1040 tax return to TPP. Tax Planner Pro read it and built the personal tax projection for me based on last year's tax return. And so all you need to get is your tax return, the tax return from the client, which they'll give you if you're doing tax planning for them. They'll give it to you even if you're not. Just ask a client for a 1040, they'll give it to you. And all of a sudden now, this whole thing's built. So how long did that take? That takes like 2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah.
All of it's done. The planning module's ready. The simulator's ready. Everything's ready for you. And all you have to do is start communicating with clients and showing them how to use it and showing them how to see how much they owe in tax and things that they can do about it and all of that. So with that, I know we're running behind on time just a little bit, but that is the gist of it, and it is it's a really fantastic product once you start using it with clients. They love it and they'll appreciate it, and they start to see you as, what did we talk about at the beginning of the webinar? They start to see you as being proactive and not reactive.
Yeah, you've got their back. That's the feeling that they have.
Yeah.
You're looking out for their welfare.
Absolutely.
And us as bookkeepers, we're the closest to them. So I think having a tool like this makes it easier on us to feel more confident. But then you're, as you said too, you're providing all the training as well. And
do you want me to send you back as the presenter now?
No, you get to stay presenter because my screen's not working right.
All right, well I can stay presenter because we got all kinds of things we can show.
Everyone is following me. My mission really is to gather together the bookkeepers who want to provide competent consultative services with confidence for our clients so that we can all win. One of my mottos is always win-win or no deal. Well, the quality clients are going to want this type of service, but we've struggled to find a way to become more consultative in a way that the client recognizes right away, that's easy enough for us to be able to do confidently, and the software clearly helps us. You're giving us the training to me this is a bridge that gets us to where we want to go, and it also helps us get the tax preparers and the CPAs who are not doing the services that they should be for the clients, that you can even collaborate with them and help them to up their game for the client's benefit as well. So it fits all the pieces that I've been trying to do for years now. So thank you.
It's great, and this software aligns well with what you're trying to do, which is why I was really excited to be here and beginning to talk about some things that I haven't gotten to talk about with anybody really that I think are coming.
Whether you sign up for the software or not, I hope you will walk away with seeing, just by proactively working with your client, anticipating their needs and looking for ways to save them money, taxes is a big one, you're going to be able to start moving towards that advisory role, that trusted advisory. And I believe Chris when he says, the rise of the bookkeeper, but I would put the caveat in there, the bookkeeper who's willing to embrace advisory services. So with that, please do fill out the exit survey, and congratulations for coming live, because I'm not sure what the recording is going to come out to be. So always an adventure. So thank you very much, Chris, too, for taking the time and sticking with us to make this webinar happen.
It's my pleasure. Take care.